Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
CNC Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, CNC provides patient-centered care for your entire family. CNC Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher, live from our Pontchartrain Production Studios on a beautiful day here in New Orleans, post Mardi Gras as we get into the Lenten season, and of course the festival season as well. A lot to talk about, a lot of sports going on, so much overlap right now between, again, college basketball, college baseball, the NBA, and of course, again, the NFL is a year-round. So we'll get into all that today. Saints, LSU, Tulane, Pelicans, Southland Conference, all that will be on our docket today. And of course, to break it down, two of the best we have in the city. Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com and 106.1 FM Nash Icon, and Richie Mills of WLAE-TV Sports. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being with us today. And we always like to start off letting folks know a little bit about what you guys are involved in. Of course, Jude is the voice of UNO athletics as well, UNO basketball. Tell us a little bit about what you're involved in.
Well, we're down the stretch in basketball, 3 regular season games left, starting with day of this filming, and UNO trying to secure their place in the Southland Conference tournament. Last home game against Nichols this evening, Thursday night, and then a couple on the road. So the Privateers finally getting things going after a long losing skid, winning 2 straight on the road last week, surprising a lot of people, so maybe things can turn around here. So that keeps me busy this time of year, but about to end. But CrescentCitySports.com is a year-round venture, of course, and we're busy covering all the sports, high school, college, and the pros, as well as usual, on the radio right after your fine program on 106.1 FM, part of the 6 o'clock hour every weekday and night on All Access. You can always catch me on Tuesday nights, and I fill in here and there when I get the opportunity.
There you go. Richie, welcome back to the show. Good to have you. And once again, tell us a little bit about all the programming over at Channel 26.
Well, weeknight sports, 6 and 10 on weeknights. You can catch me on the weekend, Saturdays 6 and 10, Sundays 5 and 10. Friday nights, we have the WGNO Sports Zone. 10 o'clock, NOLA 38, the CW, and we have Friday night sports right now. It's kind of our buffer in between Friday night football and Friday night fastball,
right?
But it features, wrestling, soccer, baseball, basketball, all the great things that surround prep sports around this time of the year. That's on NOLA 38 at 11, and again on WGNO at midnight.
Well, between both of you guys, what you guys are involved in with again, Crescent City Sports and with WGNO, you guys again handle really all the high school programs. It doesn't matter, again, where they are in Louisiana, you guys are going there. Also, again, it doesn't matter what program it is, whether it's wrestling, whether it's, again, soccer, football, basketball, baseball. Both you guys, stations and, of course, sites do a great job in covering that.
And we have to give a lot of credit to, on my side, Ken Trahan, and of course Ed Daniels on Richie's side. Look, they have made it their life's work to be able to promote local high school sports, and our audiences continue to grow, and we share audience as a result, because it's been an underserved market. I think we find locally, and look, I understand it's an advertising-based business. People want to hear about the Saints, they want to hear about LSU, and now maybe a little bit more about Tulane. But we have such guaranteed audience, parents, alums, they care about high schools. It's still a community where when somebody asks where you go to school, they mean your high school. So we're happy to fill in that gap, and we have great sports to cover, fortunately, feeding right into baseball season, which gets better and better. And there's events like the WGNO Classic that really starts high school baseball off this week. And we're happy to have the Summer League coming up for the second year that a lot of the local schools are really excited to be involved in.
Why don't you talk about the Classic as well?
All the local powerhouses as far as baseball goes, from the Catholic League, select, non-select, all paired against each other. Teams that you would normally see play each other in the regular season or really in the postseason match up against each other. It's just a great thing that's been going on for so many years. I've been fortunate enough to have a small hand in it, very minimal hand in it. But I think Ed and the surrounding area coaches do a great job of keeping this thing going, knowing the money that it raises locally for charity, the competitive nature of the programs that are involved. So that's really cool. And then it's also, you know, part of this big grand scheme of the overlap in sports right now that you just talked about, while we're dealing with basketball, soccer championships, wrestling, all that stuff.
No doubt about it. And of course, soccer last night, championship up in your neck of the woods at Hammond, right?
Yes, sir. And Newman girls won. They
won last night. And of course, wrestling. You guys were all over wrestling last week. So again, they'll keep it going. Again, WGNO-TV, Crescent City Sports, your home for high school athletics. All right, let's start Saints as yeah, that's right. They pay the bills. Let's talk about Alvin Kamara first. A more enhanced video came out this week, something that I think a lot of us anticipated that eventually that would come out. I'm surprised it was held back as long as it was, especially now again with with the internet, etc. I think most people thought it would be maybe a 4-game suspension. After looking at it, some people maybe believe 6 or 8 game suspension for Alvin Kamara. It's going to be hard to really count on him for this season. The one thing you can say is, again, maybe when he does come back, he'll be fresh for the stretch run. But the Saints have some work to do in that offensive backfield now, because you're not going to be able to count on Alvin Kamara.
Right, and you know that Mark Ingram at this point, do you really want to bring him back as your primary running back? Probably not. So, yeah, it could be a real start-over situation. Free agency, of course, really launches with the NFL calendar year flipping in March. Maybe you look for a veteran who's proven, who can be a jack of all trades, but you're not going to spend major money, obviously, on somebody with Kamara still as your number one. Perhaps this is a year where they prioritize a second or maybe even first-day draft choice. Bijan Robinson of Texas being highly rated, Tajay Spears of Tulane getting a lot of publicity. Somebody to be able to have another weapon, maybe a young pair of legs. Saints may have to do that because, like you said, 4 games is probably generous at this point as far as the length of suspension from what we're seeing. We're not the judges. That happens in New York in NFL headquarters, but it doesn't look good. And that's just another area where the Saints have to solidify themselves. They don't have major holes all over the place, but their biggest being quarterback is going to require a certain amount of attention and a certain amount of money. And after that, that leaves very little in order to spend in other areas. So as usual, Mickey Loomis will have to pinch those pennies and spend wisely.
Already Ryan Ramczyk today, Lutz today, reworking their deals. We see McCoy rework his deal. Several other Saints again reworking their deals to get under the cap. We'll get into that in a moment. Your thoughts on the Kamara situation? Is this a situation where they're going to go in the draft, maybe draft a back similar to Kamara, like a Tajay Spears, and then as Jude was alluding to, also a big physical back, which again they really lacked last year. Yeah, especially after Latavius Murray left for Denver.
Right. This changes everything you were planning to do with the draft, because no matter what angle you look at the surveillance video, it doesn't paint a pretty picture for Alvin Kamara. I think you're looking at least 6 games. But yeah, it does. It changes everything. I think Tajay Spears is a great great fit. The explosion's there. The one thing with him is you want to see him stay healthy.
Yes.
And I think you need a reliable back that's going to fit this system. I think you can mold your offense to whatever style you draft, but I think as far as preference goes, you want someone that's going to be reliable and available. Now, the Kamara situation is kind of tricky because he does have that big contract on their books. As far as your negative $35 million in the cap right now, do you feed into that contract at all? Do you restructure that at all to maybe help your cause, knowing that one of your top assets you're paying top dollar for is not going to be available?
Right.
So that's my thing. Is this situation, while it's not favorable for any party involved, can you play it into your favor if you are the New Orleans Saints? Because right now you've had to basically restructure everything you were doing from a scouting and recruiting perspective for the draft.
Right. I think you got to restructure. I think he's losing game checks. So I don't think he's taking a pay cut here.
So deferring money to the future would really be beneficial to him, considering the suspension. It makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense, which I think happened a couple of years ago, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to think who it was. I think it wasn't Lattimore, where they brought after his gun charge in Ohio.
Right.
They took his base down to, again, just a minimum salary, turned everything else into a signing bonus where it wasn't touched by the NFL, and ultimately, again, what they fined him for was the game checks he was getting on the base salary. So I could see something like that happening, that will help Kamara in his favor, but also help the Saints as well. Look, they're kicking the can down the road continuously here. There's no other way around it. For them to be able to get under the $57 million over the cap that they are right now, they have to restructure these deals. They're in a situation now where they are unable to be able to trade or maybe cut some of the players, the big-time players on this team, and you would say more, again, trade, because again, then that means all the dead money becomes due at that point, and they've restructured these deals so much, adding these dummy years, that they're pretty much stuck with their core. So everybody wants to say, trade this one, trade that one. They're kind of unable to be able to do that because of salary cap implications.
And it's very hard to be able to trade high-dollar players from one roster to another because of the league in general to begin with. So they plan for this. As you mentioned, the dummy years. They're always planning to restructure and pushing it down the road. And I always want to bring up that, remember what COVID did to the planning. Everybody said one day the Saints were going to pay. They weren't supposed to have to pay, even after Drew Brees, with that dead money with him leaving, like they had to because of COVID and the salary cap dropping $25 million when it was always supposed to go up. So you can't blame them for that. They're still in workable shape. If they had the right quarterback, we wouldn't be talking about this nearly as much. We'd just assume they'd build a proper roster and they'd figure it out. Because they don't, and bringing one in who's a veteran is going to be so costly salary-wise, whether you do it short-term and really pay, or what you're going to wind up doing if it were somebody like a Derek Carr, a Geno Smith, just pulling those names out, then you're going to have a long-term deal where you're stuck with that quarterback. You're married to him for a good number of years. Either way, that's going to be an issue that it's weird for me to think of the Saints right now taking care of these contracts and creating the money without them knowing where the quarterback money is going to go. Until we see that, we can't guess who stays and who goes and how aggressive the Saints can be in free agency otherwise.
To his point, you want to go ahead and piggyback on what he was saying, because I'm going to piggyback on it as well. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I was going to say, in regards to the quarterback discussion, how do you sell this situation to someone?
Man,
I mean,
are you reading my notes?
No, I'm thinking to myself, all the names that are out there, sure, they're not flashy names, but it's just so difficult to sell this situation to somebody, knowing that from a front office perspective, your back's against the wall. You're working behind the 8 ball. All those contracts you defer to the future, they're going to catch up to you at some point. I think this offseason might be the most critical for the trajectory of the team for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I'm with you. The gambling money, the digital TV money is going to kick in within the next 2 to 3 years. They're banking on that, okay? Again, we saw the cap move up significantly this year. They're still paying, I think this is the last year, the COVID bills they're paying. So again, if there's not another pandemic in the world, and again, maybe they're looking at a steady increase in the salary cap, because the league is going to be making more money. But to Richie's point, and I want to get into Derek Carr now, because Derek Carr visited the Jets, and the Jets are saying they're going to make him a first ballot Hall of Famer when they haven't had a quarterback there since Joe Namath. Okay? But okay, I get it. When you're a quarterback, what is the draw? Peyton was the draw before, right? Peyton coming, I'm going to go play for Peyton. And, a lot of guys wanted to play with Breeze. Now you're in a situation where how do you sell a guy like Carmichael, okay, as the offensive coordinator or the play caller to a person, to a player like Derek Carr, who again, obviously they're all in on Derek Carr here, and when Derek Carr's looking around the league, or maybe again, what may be his choices, because I still believe, even though there was a report this week that Green Bay, that Aaron Rodgers was staying with Green Bay, I still believe that's a divorce that's waiting to happen. And they're looking to be able to trade him, and the Jets look like the logical place there. But there are some other places that, again, that maybe Derek Carr may be able to land. But how do you sell it? I'll take Richie first. How do you sell that? How do you sell Carmichael? How do you sell this offense that, again, is minus Sean Payton to a quarterback or to an offensive player?
It's tough because, in a situation like Derek Carr's, it's the familiarity that you're able to sell with Dennis Allen, the assistant coaches they bring in. But from that perspective, this isn't the selling point you had a year ago where you were like, oh, we have Michael Thomas, we have Jarvis Landry, Alvin Kamara, a healthy offensive line that at one point in the last 5 years was one of the best in the NFL. You have a reputable history of being an offensive power. You can't sell that anymore because the pieces are not there anymore. The health has always been an issue. Carmichael had somewhat of a shaky year, but I think injuries played heavily into that. Your selling points took a hit last year, obviously, and you can't sell because you can't guarantee all this money that these quarterbacks are looking for these days. The assets that you had in the past are not there anymore.
Okay.
Let's say you figure out the money. The money's not an issue.
I'll be honest, Richie, I think they could figure the money out.
Yeah, I have faith that they can do that.
Right.
But then you're talking about the fact that teams that are looking to spend money on a quarterback right now, it's almost a lesser of all the evils kind of choice.
Right.
For a Derek Carr, for example, Tampa Bay is in salary cap Hades, just like the Saints, and you have to measure those two rosters. What's more stable? They're making changes on their coaching staff post Tom Brady, following Tom Brady. Okay, so that's in your own division.
I think they're both very similar.
Right, really are. Carolina is probably going to go young.
Right.
Atlanta, I think, is looking mobile and/or young. Maybe they want to get a closer look at Desmond Ridder. Who knows what they're thinking? But I think they're looking mobile quarterback from what they've done the past couple of years, moving on from Matt Ryan. Washington, what a mess that is. That's who you're competing with. Now, the Jets may be the most attractive of the bunch, but they haven't won, and you go into that cauldron. That is that New York market. You want to be sure that the situation, the coaching deal with Robert Saleh, is he sticking around after this year? Can you save that? Now, quarterbacks have confidence when they're starters in the league and getting big money. Carr certainly would have that, but he's got to question that as well. And if Rodgers does go on the market, I'd say the Jets are the favorite. Start picking out other teams. There are other questionable situations as far as teams that are, desperate enough to be able to spend the type of money, $35-40 million a year, that somebody like Carr, like Garoppolo, which makes me shake my head, Geno Smith, if he's not tagged. It's a big question where the Saints can win out simply because their competition isn't that great, but it could be a poison chalice if they actually do win on the wrong guy.
Let's talk about that. Okay, when you look at right now, Rodgers, I would think Las Vegas would be in the mix, right? Sure. You would think the Jets would be in the mix there if ultimately Green Bay moves off. If not, they got to make a decision on Jordan Love no matter what. Okay, they can't even they're sitting behind him once again in that situation. For the Saints, I think the money, Carr's not going to make less than the $40 million he was going to get. So you got to figure he's going to get $50 million at least. I think the Saints can make it work. I think that was what that two-day interview was about, showing them how they could structure the deal to make it work. The question is, at the end of the day, how do you sell New Orleans to Carr, as what Richie said, without the weapons? Carmichael, have they not named a quote-unquote offensive coordinator because maybe there's something in the works right now? If they are to try to get Carr here to maybe a quarterback coach that he worked with before. I wanted to do the research and then get to it last night on, okay, who was working with Carr when Allen was at Oakland, okay?
But that's a little too far back.
It really is.
Such a short period of time. It's more successful years, including not this past season, but the one before when the Raiders were a playoff team. It didn't work out, obviously, under Josh McDaniels. It was better just a year before that. So who knows what the Saints are thinking in that area until they have the quarterback. But what the Saints can sell is organizational stability. Okay. Even after Sean Payton, Mickey Loomis has been here for decades. You've got Dennis Allen getting at least that commitment and now being able to reshape his side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, the way he likes it. So they want him to work out. Now, anywhere you go, any of these places, the head coach coach could be out in a year anyway.
Absolutely.
So, again, who you're competing against, the lesser of the evils for guys like that. I think the Saints do have enough stability in place with a good defense that's ready to win now that I'm sure the conversations took place during the visit here. Look, we're going to look to add this. We know the running back situation needs a little bit more. We maybe need another wide receiver, but we really like the fact that Chris Olave worked out. And I think that Rashid Shaheed is an exciting young player when you look at the young numbers, who's going to get more opportunities. So you can start selling that. A veteran offensive line, where some might argue, is Andrus Peat part of that, and is that a good
Probably
thing?
not.
But they do have some good pieces there. Steady tackles when healthy, if you believe Trevor Penning's going to work out. So you start putting that on the table to Carr, and the Saints can certainly be attractive enough. If they're going $40+ million a year, that'll be plenty attractive enough, I think, versus probably the rest of the competition.
I guess my thing, why I keep bringing up the money, is because I daily pull up that free agency list of all the free agents that are out of the door, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, you could sell a good defense with depth. You could sell a great offensive line, a great run game, weapons. You can sell all of that, but when I look at this free agent list, I'm like, how are you going to afford to retain everyone? You're not going to be able to do that. So in some sense, you're saying we could be this. We could have this. We could be good on offense with you. We could be good on defense. We'll figure all that stuff. It's just a tough sell at the end of the day, because you have 20+ free agents that have been critical to what you've been doing the past couple of years. You're going to have to find a way to retain. So that's why I keep bringing up the money aspect of it.
He's absolutely right. Now, the defense, the back seven looks like it's going to be stable on paper, that those guys are going to be back. So the questions are on the defensive line. David Onyemata, obviously, Marcus Davenport.
Both with like, what, $25 million in dead money, right?
Right. So, I mean, that's a big deal. That's 2 starters. So who knows how that's going to work out, but at least it's more stable maybe than a lot of other situations when you start comparing around the league. Tampa's got an older roster. The Saints roster actually isn't that old by comparison to some of these other teams on the market, although the Jets are very young, and I think that's an attractive spot for everybody. I just think that the overall stability of the organization is a plus compared to some of the other places. That doesn't mean that Carr, Garoppolo, Smith, any of those guys would actually want to live here, which is another question entirely. Great place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live here, is what a lot of people say about New Orleans who don't know New Orleans.
It is an issue now, and I've talked about it on the radio show. There was a time when players came to New Orleans, they laid down roots, okay? They lived on the North Shore. They lived out in St. Charles Parish, and they stayed even after their playing days were over. That's not happening now. Players, with the exception, maybe Cam Jordan is the only guy who's laid down roots here, and I don't know if he'll be here after his playing days are over. But again, it's different now than what it once was in terms of players laying down roots. Let's say Derek Carr signs elsewhere. What direction do the Saints go? And I want to talk about 2 things. Number one, the mobile quarterback, which is the way the NFL's going right now. And I wouldn't have thought that this is the direction they're going, but look, college quarterbacks are coming out. They're in the spread offense. A lot of them are athletic quarterbacks. Hendon Hooker seems to be the name we keep hearing. I did a little deep dive on him. And, again, one of the knocks against him is, again, that, the splits are wide. He's not throwing the ball over the middle like you have to do in the NFL. They're not going to know if he's going to be able to do that, again, in terms of private workouts, because he's still coming off the knee injury. So he is a little bit of a question mark. You look at his 2 years at Tennessee, going up against SEC competition. The guy didn't throw interceptions. The guy threw touchdowns and was a 64% passer. So again, he's an accurate passer, and he has the ability to run. Do you stay with a Taysom Hill and bring in a Hendon Hooker, or you bring it back in Andy Dalton and drafting a Hendon Hooker, or are you changing this offense now to be more of a more of a mobile quarterback instead of that drop back passer we've been used to with the Drew Brees?
If you draft a quarterback, I think Dalton and Taysom Hill are back, and you bring that guy along, whether it's Hooker, who has the added issue of the knee injury, or anybody else. I think that's the way they go otherwise if they can't find a veteran, and it's really that simple. Now, how much they're going to value that quarterback when they pick 29th, 40th, and 71st in the first 3 rounds, your guess is as good as mine, but I don't think they want to go that route because they want to win now. That hasn't changed, so that's why they want the veteran first, and they'll go through every avenue, just like last offseason, that they could to reasonably improve before they decide to go with the young quarterback. They'll know by the end of March whether they have to go in that direction.
I think the most important free agent, this is obviously an unpopular opinion, in my opinion, is Andy Dalton.
Okay.
You can re-sign him, one-year deal, get him for cheap. You know what you're getting out of him. He didn't play bad last year. He really didn't. Cards
and his stats are very similar.
In the grand scheme of all the mess that was the New Orleans Saints last year, Andy Dalton was not a part of that. He played well. Now, my also thing is, this is a draft that's coming up where you don't have to trade up. A quarterback's going to fall into your lap, one that's going to be low risk, high reward. You saw what Brock Purdy was, Mr. Irrelevant at the end of the draft, brought San Francisco to the NFC Championship. That is where the quarterback class this year's draft lies. You can have one fall into your lap like a Hendon Hooker somewhere in the second to later rounds and have low risk, high reward. Hendon Hooker's a great quarterback. He is. He's shown that. I think you can break down all the analytics that is him as a quarterback, but the eye test doesn't lie to you. I mean, that's a good quarterback. And I think the thing with him is, coming off the injury, you don't have to rush him into play. You can develop him however you see fit. So that situation in itself can take care of itself. But I think Andy Dalton is the route that the Saints need to go at quarterback right now.
Okay. Do you agree about Hendon Hooker?
I think that, first of all, with Dalton, no matter what, I think it would be great to have him back as a backup. There's no negative to that.
It's probably about $14 million instead of the $3 that again, you paid him.
Sure.
Right. But he's not going to be getting 40.
But still, he's that security blanket where you know what you're going to get from him. But yeah, Hendon Hooker is a guy who you wonder after the knee injury what he's going to look like, because his ad-lib ability does add to the value, and it takes away a little bit of the concern of the type of system he played in. Josh Heupel at Tennessee, with the wide splits with the wide receivers, not really throwing to the middle of the field, trying to come up with matchups that doesn't necessarily translate to the NFL. So you're trying to guess how he's going to be able to handle an offense like that, whereas a Bryce Young, who's going to still go high despite being an undersized quarterback, you know he's got the mind for it and has played in a pro-style offense. So that's why guys like that drop. Maybe a Jared Hall from BYU is a better style fit as far as his experience, but he's going to be dinged because Zach Wilson was a failure. That happens all the time, coming from the same school right after him, but he might be a far better pro quarterback. I like a guy in Clayton Tune when you start thinking middle rounds as a developmental guy who started for 5 years and went through a lot of different ups and downs because of the program at Houston under Dana Holgorsen. That's another guy that just stands out to me that I think the Saints are probably doing a lot of homework on. Those are the value guys. You know who the top guys are going to be. It's going to be C.J. Stroud, I mentioned Young, and Will Levis is going to be a top 10 pick out of Kentucky. After that, like Richie said, there's no reason to trade up. If they still had their original pick, which would be 10th overall, we'd be having a different conversation.
No doubt. And you probably would be looking at Derek Carr at this point. But again, to your point, they don't want to be that team that goes into the abyss and loses for 2 or 3 years. They're trying to stay competitive, even with the salary cap problems. All right, let's talk before we move on from the Saints and move into our next block. Needs. Okay, not a lot of money on the open market. They're going to try to re-sign their own to again, cap-friendly deals if they can do it. But let's face it, the guard position is a need. Defensive tackle is a need. It's a huge need. Maybe multiple defensive tackles. You got to see defensive end too, depending on what's going to happen. I don't see them bringing Davenport back. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. Wide receiver. Well, and not just again a receiver coming from the draft, but you've got to get a veteran receiver. You got young receivers on this team. You need veterans as well. We talked about the running back position. Some can say now with Marcus May going to be suspended as well, you need another safety. You need a safety. Tight end has also been mentioned. Offensive tackle. What happens with Penning if he doesn't come back healthy? I know they're talking about moving Hurst inside, but to me, he's a utility guy. Can you guys add anything? That's a laundry list. Okay. Is there anything added to that? You know, I mean, or is there a position that I mentioned that you don't think is a need on this team right now?
Kicker.
Well, they just reworked Lutz. So, I mean, you know, again,
they might bring in a young guy to get a look, just like they did at Hunter.
By reworking the intricacies of that deal, just make it seem like there is a pending competition that's about to take place, because he did have his worst year.
No, he did. And you know, again, a lot of guys did without Peyton's voice there, no doubt. Lot of needs, picks, but again, not a lot of money on free agency.
But the two areas that you mentioned, because you're right on that whole list, where they would address it specifically with a veteran, I think they might want a veteran at defensive tackle. And I would say that they have to have one at wide receiver. If Jarvis Landry isn't coming back, that didn't seem to work out. I mean, they could bring him back cheap again. He probably has no market, but we're all assuming that Michael Thomas is going to be released after the way the contract was reworked. They do need somebody that can bring a big physical presence. I like the idea that Jawan Johnson should be able to take another step and be more a part of the offense than he was. He was great in the red zone, but let's see him get the football a little bit more. Maybe that's an area where at tight end, because you have Taysom Hill still, Adam Troutman at least took a step forward as a usable tight end at that spot. That's an area they don't want to spend money. Whereas some of these other spots, they can go ahead and use their draft picks, maybe come up with another nugget or two of gold and undrafted free agency. They're going to have that combination work in order to keep moving forward and keep, competing to win like they believe they should still be doing. If they could spend the money at quarterback and have their guy, that's one less area in the draft they have to think about, particularly top 3 round capital. So that's another sense of urgency there to get the guy who's going to be the starter, who has skins on the wall.
And that's why I said this offseason is so critical for this front office, because all those positions you just mentioned and the ones you didn't still need depth. And that long list of free agents, you're going to have to pick and choose which one you think are the right fit for your club moving forward. I agree.
Coaching staff: Joe Woods now defensive coordinator. Todd Grantham comes in as a defensive line coach. Marcus Robinson is your secondary coach. Clancy Barone is your tight end coach. Kevin Carberry is assistant offensive line coach. They bring back Ronald Curry. Is this a better staff this year than previous years? I mean, this is Allen's guys, right? I mean, all we heard was continuity, keep it all together. There's a great staff. Got to keep this staff together. Can't let these guys go. We knew Peyton was going to come in and poach what he wanted. I'm just. On paper, it doesn't excite me. I mean,
we can come back in 11 months and answer that question for you. There's no way to know.
I think the one aspect of that list that you just named that might make it a little bit better is the fact you have a singular defensive coordinator instead of 2 co's. And then Joe Woods is, Cleveland's had one of the better defenses in the league for the last few years under him. So, in my opinion, under that little asterisk, that is why it might be a little bit better. But like he said,
speculation alert. 2 co-defensive coordinators who are pretty strong voices with strong opinions, and maybe that didn't gel with Dennis Allen. He's the defensive coach. He's in charge. So he probably put together a staff that more fits his needs, and we should trust him on that side of the ball. Offensive side of the ball, we continue to have questions, but we know that Doug Marrone coming in last year, the idea there was a change in philosophy as far as the offensive line and how it's going to operate moving forward, and we saw more changes in that direction that really shouldn't be surprising.
People forget he was the first offensive coordinator of the New Orleans Saints under Sean Payton. When Marrone came in, he wasn't the offensive line coach, he was the offensive coordinator. I thought he was going to be the kind of fallback guy in case Carmichael had issues. Carmichael had issues and they didn't fall back on him. Ronald Curry has come back. What position will he have with this team now? Will he be the play caller? Will Carmichael continue to be the play caller? All that's still up in the air. And as I mentioned earlier, if you bring in a Carr, does he have some say-so in maybe the quarterback coach he wants?
All of that yet to play out, but it is important to note just on the offensive line, and think of 2006, the early Sean Payton era. That team could really run the football. That's important to a defensive-minded coach like Dennis Allen, and the Saints simply were not consistent running the football last year, and that's got to change, especially when you start thinking about who the quarterback might be.
No doubt about it. All right, guys, we'll leave it here with the Saints. We'll take a break. We'll hear from our underwriters. When we come back, we'll jump into Pelicans. Again, big stretch right now, 23 games left in the season. Then we'll jump into some college basketball. Also, again, we'll touch on college football, all coming up here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guests today are Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com, 106.1 FM, and also the voice of UNO Athletics, and Richie Mills of Channel 26 Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We'll be right back.
Air conditioning, heating, and refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhardt has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhardt's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhardt's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhardt's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Jude Young and also Richie Mills are our guests this evening. Okay, Pels are 30-29 as we start the mythical end of the season. 23 games left. They're in 7th place. They're 3 games out of 4th, but a game and a half out of the playoffs. They did not participate in the buyout market up to this point. It doesn't look like they're going to get involved in it. They made one trade at the deadline, again moving off of Devontae Graham and bringing in Josh Richardson, which I think is a plus side for them. I think he'll be a better player for the Pels than Graham was. There are 23 games left. 11 at home, 12 on the road, 19 against the West, 4 against the East. And of course, they have to make up for that 3 and 16th month of January where they had 10 straight losses. Zion is going to be out at least a couple more weeks. Some are saying maybe the middle of March before he gets back, if then. Brandon Ingram is back after, again, 2 months out. Zion went out on the 2nd of January. We're approaching the 2nd of March now. So that'll be another 2 months on top of what he missed earlier in the season as well. It's one of the reasons why I felt like they needed to go get another star at the trading deadline. By now, you know your 2 studs cannot stay healthy. And you're hoping that, again, one is healthy and then the other if one is healthy, the other one is unhealthy, that at least you can ride one. They have not been able to do that. C.J. McCollum is a nice addition, but I felt like they should have went out and got one more player. Obviously, what was being asked for, some of their young stars, they didn't want to come off of. I was hoping maybe they'd give up on some of those first-round picks. It just didn't come to fruition. I am surprised they're not part of the buyout market to maybe try to add one more player here, but obviously they want to stand pat and don't want to get into the luxury tax situation for next season. I guess my first question is, where's this team going to end up? I mean, you're asking this team now to come back. It's just so different when you're playing Brandon Ingram by himself as opposed to Zion by himself in terms of the offense, the way the offense works. And then when those 2 guys are on the floor together, getting them to be able to play a cooperative, in terms of on the floor, on the fly here as you're getting ready to go into the playoffs. Jude, it's complicated, but there's 23 games left and your back's against the wall, and the rest of the West got better.
And it's way too complicated when you've already committed to that big 3, the amount of money you've committed to them this year and future years to go out and get another star. They simply couldn't do it without trading one of them away. Right. And until you see this group actually play together for more than 10 games, that's it, we've seen 10 games, you don't know how they're going to mesh moving forward. I don't think that we can write off Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram as they're going to keep getting injured, they're injury prone. I think the NBA, when guys get nicks, they're going to miss more time than we like. It's just the nature of a player-driven league. Right. But at the same time, none of these injuries equate to something that you would think would be chronic. But we do know that the body type of Zion Williamson in particular will continue to raise flags as far as how he can endure an NBA season. But you still have to wait and see. You committed to him. You went with the long-term deal. Now you've got to ride it out. So it's about the short term right now. You've got a lot of other young players. See how they fit. Dyson Daniels is coming back healthy now after missing some time to start the second half. Get a further look at him. You got to find out whether Herb Jones, is this a sophomore slump as a shooter, or is it a liability that means you already have a Trey Murphy, you have a Dyson Daniels, maybe Jones is the guy you have to trade to get another shooter, for example. They still need more shooting, and it would have been nice if they'd have gotten that. But by getting Josh Richardson, I think they need to figure out for the short term, pre-Zion return. How good can we be defensively? Richardson upgrades them there. He's a wing who can play a lot of different spots, and he showed it right away. Showed up and made them better defensively on the perimeter. Daniels has that kind of talent. Jones is a plus defender. Murphy gives you that versatility. You've got all these pieces. Nance is healthy again. He's another guy who gives you good front court defensive versatility. I think they need to get better defensively to accentuate their positives versus the negatives of, yeah, we probably need to keep reshaping this come next offseason, get better in the shooting department. But until we see the big three together, we really can't figure out what those guys need to be their best, because you're only as good as how you facilitate your very best players. There's no way David Griffin and company can know that yet. So I'm glad they didn't do anything drastic at the deadline, because keeping their flexibility is going to be very important to get it right or get out of a Williamson contract, an Ingram contract if they have to, either because of durability or just plain bad fit.
I think there's comfort knowing that this team that you have right now, you know what they are. You know what they're capable of. We saw this team this time last year in the fact that they can compete and battle through a play-in tournament. They can give the top seed in the West, a best shot in a playoff series. But like you said, the West got better across the board. That's not going to be as simple as it was a year ago. In terms of Zion Williamson, it's so disappointing because 114 games played in 4 years, 180 plus missed and counting. And I did some research on this because I was also a little curious about the injuries themselves. They're all right leg, right foot, right meniscus, right ankle, so in my right hamstring. So in my thing is those are going to add up at some point. You hate to see it because he is a generational talent when he's healthy. This team is just different and better when he is healthy, but without him, you saw what they are, and we saw that last year in the play-in tournament and in that first series with the Suns in the Western Conference. The Devontae Graham move, you brought Devontae Graham in to play with a Zion Williamson-led team. The floor spacing was there, a guy that can knock down shots left and right. We see that now in San Antonio. That's what he's doing. Josh Richardson addresses what this team right now needs, and I think like what you just said, defense, a guy that can also consistently facilitate, he can shoot the ball, he can do so many different things Devontae Graham couldn't. So he fits this team's mold right now, but they're not going to be any more than a play-in tournament team, a first-round playoff team without their star player.
Okay, star players come back, 23 games left. How many games do they have to win to stay out the play-in tournament, number one? Can they get back as high as 4, or is maybe 5 or 6 the ceiling for this team because the West is so much tougher?
I think they'll stay in that play-in tournament range, and you hate to see it because they've just been different. They've struggled without Zion Williamson in the lineup, and then at times they fumble. They've had some bad losses. And you mentioned 19 times they play Western Conference teams in this final stretch. The Kevin Durant's of the world have taken their talents to Phoenix. Kyrie Irving's in Dallas now. Denver's a power. They didn't have to make many moves. So in my opinion, that's your toughest stretch right there, or the teams in the West that did get better, you're going to have to go through to make any sort of advancement in the postseason.
I think, unfortunately, Richie's right. That's about where they're going to be. It would be a surprise if they can get up into the top 6 and avoid that situation. But again, it's okay if they lose the battle, if they don't lose the war long term. They need to figure out their assets, how they think they're going to be able to fit, even if they can't see them actually fit together as an entire team. So they know in the offseason where they need to go. These other teams, they're more attractive markets. They're jumping in and they're bringing in these stars, and you're going to have to continue to combat that. That makes it even more important to be able to value your own assets and see who you definitely want to keep and who you're willing to trade to get better. I'm glad, again, that they didn't panic. It would be nice to see those guys come together, because if they have the big three healthy, even in a play-in, they're probably going to be favored to win those games, and that won't necessarily hurt them to have to play those high caliber games again. I think it helped some of these young guys last year. I think it can help again this year. This is the bright side. This is the glass half full, because again, if you can't get your best players on the floor for more than 10 games, and maybe maybe 5, 6 more if we're being optimistic the rest of the way, because they're going to be super careful with Zion, it's really hard to tell where this team's going in the short term, but they're still set up really well for the long term. Let other teams make their all-in moves, and you're just going to be stronger when you're ready to make yours.
Is this a mulligan year now?
I wouldn't say that, because we've seen this plan kind of work in its own. I look at Sacramento, the perfect example, a team that's built up on assets. Over the years, they've lost a lot of games in that sense. They make the one trade for Domantas Sabonis like the Pelicans did with C.J. McCollum, and look at them now. They're competing at the top of the Western Conference. So I think there's a blueprint for that now that you can follow, like the Pelicans are doing. They're gaining assets, they're developing their talent, and they make minimal moves, but still big moves here and there. So in that sense, I wouldn't call it a mulligan year. Yeah, it is unfortunate, but because they can still compete. I mean, while there are powers at the top of the West, there are a little shaky teams as well. So I think you can catch someone off guard at any given moment. You saw that with the Suns last year in the first round.
Despite it all, a 10-game losing streak, playing without their best 2 players, they're still a game over 500 in the super competitive and deep Western Conference. So if you look at it from a positive standpoint, they've actually weathered the storm well lately, finally getting back on track and being able to compete. And there's reasons to think that almost everybody on your roster that you're depending on right now, that you're planning to keep, that's under your control beyond this year, they're going to keep getting better. So people need to understand that this is the market we're in. The quick fix isn't really going to work out. So it needs to be built so that the team's always competitive, and they're going to be competitive for the next few years. Can they become a championship team? Can things work out a little better health-wise so you can be more like Memphis and not be a disappointment? That is going to require patience.
Health is the key for this team and has been really since David Griffin took over, no doubt about it. All right, let's switch gears to, I want to talk a little college football quickly. Tulane is a revolving door, continuous. When you talk about their coaching staff, Lance Guidry has left, the defensive coordinator from Miami. Sheil Wood comes over from Troy. He's a new DC. Their special teams coordinator, Robbie Disher, left for Illinois. They're in a situation now where, again, they got a new offensive line coach. Swoboda's out. Rauscher comes in as a new offensive line coach. Slade Nagel is the new offensive coordinator. It's a tough question, but it's similar to what I asked earlier. Is this a better staff than what we saw last year, or is this we won't know anything really until we see these guys on the field coaching Tulane?
Same answer. It's impossible to tell until we see the product and how it works out. How good are these guys as communicators? You're dealing with just a quarterback alone, even though Slade Nagel was on the staff, that he's going to be a 4-year starter, and Michael Pratt's is going to play with 4 different offensive coordinators. There's something to be said about that instability that's really going to challenge Willie Fritz to make it work out. He's hiring the best guys available, and in one case, the guy he thought was the best available was out the door in less than a month.
But
so
isn't that too late now where they're at? I mean, again, if you're going to have success, your assistants are going to move on to bigger programs,
That's not a surprise. The point is we just don't know how this particular group is going to fit. Will it be an upgrade or a downgrade when you already have to follow in the footsteps of the greatest team the school's ever had? You lose Tajay Spears on the offensive side of the ball. You don't have any other guy in the building that's quite that dynamic, so the offense has to deal with that. But they have other pieces that should continue to get better. And on the defensive side, you had great leaders at linebacker, for example, that you have to replace along with a new voice, a new vision. That's a lot of change. The only bright spot is the schedule in the league gets a little easier because the league is weakened.
No doubt.
I think when you take a coordinator position at Tulane now, I mean, you have to accept it for what it is on the face value. It's a potential to win double-digit games a year, compete for a conference championship, and play for a bowl game, if not a New Year's Six bowl. That's what Tulane football is as far as accomplishments can be, face value. Now, I think in terms of this staff, Slade Nagel was calling plays in the Cotton Bowl, so that's a plus. So you have that continuity and familiarity with the pieces that are coming back for Tulane offensively. Defensively, you got one of the top group of 5 coordinators available from Troy, which I think there was a lot of depth on this Tulane defense that you didn't see a lot last year because of the big names, the Nick Andersons of the world and such. But I think they're still talented on defense enough with good direction from a proven play caller where they can still, again, win 10 games, compete for a conference championship, and compete for a New Year's Six bowl. But I think Jude brought up a great point too, is that they'll still be there.
Yeah, there's no expectation of a major drop-off because of the recruiting, the consistency there, and the fact that they do have depth now, and they're developing players and adding the right transfers when they've needed them. And the big wave of transfers last year, huge, and they didn't lose anybody. So moving forward here, if they're just developing talent and getting local guys to come home, more of them to stay, and the fact that from Texas all the way across to the Atlantic and the South, Willie Fritz has established Tulane as a place that you want to consider. I mean, all that's worked to the favor of having built a program. Him staying around means there's hope that this team's going to be at the top of their conference moving forward for years to come.
Well, you feel like the stability now is at the head coach, because he's going to be head coach maybe for life, right? But then you know that, again, if you're going to have success, your coaching staff is going to get rated. And you have to be prepared for that each and every year.
Right.
And obviously, even to the late hour here with Tulane. There was a change with LSU's coaching staff. Brian Polian, who's been, again, under a lot of pressure, saw the special team coordinator is transitioning to an off-the-field GM-type role, going to be focusing on daily operations, recruiting, and NIL. Is this a good move for the Tigers?
I love how it came out on Mardi Gras Day. Don't tell anybody. It's a move that needed to be made, because no matter how much defense of the special teams came from Kelly, from Polian, it was to say terrible is kind.
Right.
It's unbelievable that they had as much success as they had with such terrible issues as far as coverage, kick units, return game, you name it. There were problems. And Polian comes from a background, his father Bill, one of the best NFL executives building teams that we've ever seen. Now that's going to be his job at LSU. There are GMs in college football now, and I'm sure he'll do a great job there.
Almost have to be now.
Yeah, he wanted to stay on the field coming from Notre Dame. Brian Kelly gave him his chance, but the great thing about having a leader like Kelly with the power that he has no problem saying, I made a mistake, we're fixing it, we're moving on. That's what great leaders do, and I'm sure they're going to find a young up-and-coming guy that will make them better. It has to be better in that area.
I agree.
Yeah, at some point you have to understand, if you want to seriously make a run at a national championship, you have to address the weak link, and that was special teams this year. Because I always think to myself, if you don't have those mishaps against Florida State here at the Dome, are we talking about a different result for LSU this year? Do they make that playoff? But again, you have to address the weak links. I think this was a good move on their part to do that. And I think moving forward, this shows that they are fully committed to competing for a national title.
Well, Tulane and LSU did really well in recruiting. Both did really well in the transfer portal. So we're expecting, again, big things out of both programs, again, going into this season.
There's no doubt.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's talk basketball. The skid is over for LSU. 13-15, 2-13. They beat Vanderbilt last night. They had lost 14 in a row. They're in a tie with Ole Miss for last place. Tulane is 17-8. They're 10-4. They lost last night to the #1 team in the nation, Houston. And you saw the gap last night. Again, there was a lot of talk that Tulane didn't shoot well the first time around. You saw the gap between Houston and Tulane last night. That was maybe a hope for the possibility of maybe getting on the bubble, but after last night, I doubt they're probably an NIT team or one of the lesser tournaments. Your team, UNO, 8-18, 5-10. There's a four-way tie for sixth place, but they've won their last two.
Right.
Talk a little bit about UNO. Well, this is a big one this weekend, right?
Huge games this weekend for them for different reasons. The home finale against Nichols tonight. Another win against a top 5 team in the league that can be huge for tiebreakers. They need wins, period, as you mentioned in the tie. A four-way tie for 6th. Top 8 out of the 10 teams in the league make the conference tournament. So first things first, you got to win some ball games. They've won 2 last week on the road, beating Northwestern State, denying them their 20th win, breaking their 9-game winning streak. That was huge.
That really was.
And they had won the 2 nights before at A&M Commerce that had been playing really well, particularly at home. If they can take care of business against Nichols at home, they're an underdog, there's no doubt, but they can win that game if they play their best. Then they go and they play Lamar on Saturday night. That's one of those other teams in that 4-way tie. If UNO can win that one, that would give them a season sweep of Lamar, and it would be massive in potential tiebreakers with everybody else. They're giving them a chance to have a sweep of somebody where the others in that tie have basically split their games so far this season. So in a lot of ways, the game on Saturday night's even more important than this one. If UNO wins them both, they'll be in the tournament. If they at least win Lamar, they can go to McNeese last week with, I think, their destiny in their own hands based on the tiebreakers. So that's where it sets off. And UNO has one of the most dynamic guards in mid-major basketball in Jordan Johnson, a junior transfer from Denver. They missed him for 4 games and they lost them all. When he's been out there, he's top 2 in the country in 3-point percentage. He hit a massive contested 3 in the final minute that won that game at Northwestern State. He's 6'1". He doesn't look like a dynamic type of player, but he's so smooth, quick, can get to the hole when he needs to, but he's just one of the better shooters, whether catch and shoot or off the dribble, that you're going to see. So that makes UNO worth watching if you're a basketball fan alone. He is fun.
Right. 14-13 Nichols, 9-6. They're the third place tie with where you live, Hammond, America. Southeastern 15-13, 8-6. Talk about Southeastern.
Man, they've been on a skid, and I think Jude and I were talking about this before the show. The Southland Conference is a guard-driven league. If you are not stacked at that position, you're going to fall behind in the standings. In terms of Southeastern, they might have the best in the conference, and Boogie Anderson. Then you have Roger McFarland, who big physical. All their guards look like they hit the weight room pretty good, but still, Roger McFarland's a guy that can slash to the cup. He can knock down the three. Roscoe Eastman's just a facilitator. He can also knock down shots. Nick Caldwell is their X factor, a 6'7" forward. While they were injured and banged up, they had a 7-man rotation at one point when they were on their win streak. At 6'7", Nick Caldwell was guarding the 6'9s and 6'11s of the world that the Privateers even had to offer. So they kind of hit a rough patch, but they found, some momentum behind buzzer beaters, a late second shot from Matthew Strange, a Boogie Anderson floater for a buzzer beater. So the Southland Conference is guard driven. It matters where your guards are playing and how they're playing towards the end of the year, because if you're going to compete with Nichols, Caleb Huffman, Latrell Jones, those are two of the better. Corpus Christi has guards for days. Northwestern State has two of the best guards in the conference. One can shoot the lights out, the other can get to the rim whenever he wants. So I think, like I said, it's a guard driven league. In terms of Southeastern, you need those three to play their best basketball, and you need to lean on Nick Caldwell.
And Southeastern's coach David Kiefer showed the way of this new era of playing with a lot of guards, spreading people out, putting pressure on you defensively with spacing. That's why he was the coach of the year in the league last year. They played really small. Their post player was 6'6", that came up from a Division II, and he was more of an agile forward than he was really anybody that could bang inside, but could rim protect enough. They have less of that this year, but they have those options that still can play that style and put pressure on. And I think a lot of teams in the league have copied that and realized this is the way you need to recruit nowadays. You need shooting, and you need to put pressure on teams with guys who can beat you off the dribble. That's really what makes the Southland one of the more fun conferences to watch if you like up-tempo basketball. It's right up there for the third straight year as far as the top 3 or 4 league out of 32 in college basketball in tempo.
And it's all about the tournament, the Southland. Tournament, again, you get the automatic bid to the NCAA, so it's all about the tournament. Want to talk about Loyola quick? 19th overall, the men, they're 20-5, 15-3, coming off a national championship, first in their conference. Again, they're the conference regular season champions. They start today in Montgomery as the #1 seed in their conference tournament. The Loyola women are ranked 9th overall, 25-1, 17-1 in the conference regular season champs. They've won 29 in a row. The tournament again starts in Mobile, Alabama today. UNO is 6-16, 5-8, 9th in the Southland. Congratulations to, again, Lisa Stockton, who passes Leon Barmore, the most victories in coaching Louisiana teams, 577. She has a total of 640 victories. They are 16-11, 6-8, 7th in the AAC, and of course the LSU women are 5th in the nation, 25-1, 13-1. They're in 2nd place in the SEC. Loyola, quickly, we got about a minute for each one of you guys. You see those guys, those teams advancing into the national championships.
Well, there's no doubt that these programs have become stable and powers at that level. To be able to replace somebody like Stacey Hollowell and Donald Reyes come in and do what he's done, bringing guys who were just reserved, now key players leading things, new talent coming in, really hard to do to 37-1 national championship team, but yet they've done it. And Kelly Kennedy on the women's side has done a phenomenal job. 4 years. I'm surprised that she hasn't gotten a Division I job yet, and maybe her time is coming. Just want to mention amongst the low majors, mid majors, both Grambling and Southern can win the SWAC, and they have good, fun teams, physical teams. So I hope one of them can pull it off in the conference tournament. And Louisiana Lafayette, Bob Marlin's done a great job there. They don't give them enough credit for years. They have a strong team that can win the Sun Belt potentially in the postseason. I think they're sitting 3rd right now. Jordan Brown's probably the best post player in that league, so keep an eye on the Cajuns coming up in March.
You got a minute.
I think the Wolfpack women can actually compete for a national championship. They are stacked and loaded in every position possible. They're mature, which is going to pay dividends for them moving down the stretch. The men, I think they'll make a deep postseason run. I think they'll win their conference tournament. Again, they have so many new faces, so many new pieces, but they've all gelled together. And Donald Reyes has done a great job. But he told me on Sunday, he said the one thing that keeps them from competing is turnovers and rebounds. And those are areas where when they've taken care of the ball and they've rebounded well, they've won a lot of games. But in areas where they've struggled, they've lost. So again, I think they can both make deep postseason runs.
He should talk to Mark Schlesinger. We've had these conversations this year.
Jude Young, Richie Mills, fantastic job on the panel today. Thanks so much for joining us here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in. Plenty of ways to catch our program now. So many different ways to catch us now. There's a QR code on your screen right now that'll take you to WLAE-TV YouTube page or to my website. Hey, pick out the the time slot you like. Set the DVR so you never miss an episode of Inside New Orleans Sports. You catch me on the radio, 106.1 FM. That is 4 to 6 weekdays. You can listen live at ericasher.com. Also, again, the Anchor app is our home base for our podcast. We're on all podcasting platforms, iHeartRadio app, and all the TuneIn Radio app, our digital platforms. Catch the show if you can, again, 4 to 6 on the radio, but so many other ways to catch the radio show as well. I want to thank our underwriters who make this show possible. Please support each and every one of those underwriters, and we are thankful for those underwriters and thankful for you supporting those underwriters. Also to the WLA production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Logan Raffia, Alex Chacon, and of course our director, William Hill. For Jude Young and Richie Mills, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in to Inside New Orleans Sports. We'll be back with another episode for you next week. Have a great week.